Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of PostBurnout.com interviews guitarist and vocalist Robert Crosbie and bassist and vocalist David Hillard of the Dublin-based post-shoegaze band Sun Mahshene discuss the band's formation, finding their unique sound and how they are different from everything else in the Irish music scene currently, their debut album A Place We've Never Been, which was released last week, getting Ride guitarist Mark Gardner to master the album, the logistics of working as a six-piece, and much more.
Hey, how's things?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Grand, it's nice to meet you. So you soon.
How are you doing
That's
now?
right,
Nice
yeah.
to meet you, Bob.
Yeah. I'll try to take too much of your time. I'll just have a few questions and I guess the
Yeah,
first
sure.
thing I wanted to ask was actually a bit about the origin of the band. My understanding is that it started with as kind of a solo bedroom project of Nathan's that sort of eventuated into a larger project. If I got the dates correct, I think it would have started initially around 2014, and then it expanded into full band around 2018. I was wondering kind of like what was the story in terms of like your own involvement with the project.
Um, I guess, yeah. So I guess he started about, I think it was 2016, he started it off and then realized he needed to get musicians to do what he wanted to do with it. And he more or less just went around Dublin poaching people from other bands. Well, actually, poaching people from their own bands.
Yeah.
I had my own band. Um, David did his own music. Asha on keyboards had her own band. And then he was like, no, I'll have a bit of you. I'll have a bit of you. And he got us all in the band. And it kind of went through various lineup changes over a period of time. And we had COVID in the middle of all of that. And then, yeah, we kind of all got together really properly in the last couple of years. And that's kind of the story of how all that happened. It's kind of funny, really, because it was like, why should I struggle trying to do my own thing when I can just join this one?
Yeah. What was it about kind of the music that he was creating that kind of attracted you? Because I mean, like again, my understanding is that like Nathan's background was kind of in sort of the kind of the indie rock of the 90s, the kind of the Britpop of the 90s. That's a lot what he was into, and then I believe he started incorporating influence of like shoegaze. And you guys refer to yourself as a post shoegaze project. But what was it about that music that kind of from both of your perspectives kind of like made you want to get involved with the project?
Pity
For
Nathan's
me,
not here to defend himself. Well, certainly for me, it was I knew Nathan from what he was in a different band, and I nearly joined that one. And he asked me to originally come in and just help out on the recording of some of the EP stuff. And he sent me all the tracks, and I was just struck by the melody really more than anything. It was kind of in this kind of real psych reverb laden kind of heavy guitar kind of sound. It was skirting towards shoegaze, but it was more really on the kind of the psych end of things, very heavy stuff. And but what really jumped out at me was the melodies and the actual songs and the lyrics. You could hear what they were singing, this kind of thing. And it actually was, there were tunes and really good tunes at that. So that was kind of the primary thing, because the problem with shoegaze sometimes is, especially shoegaze, is that you can have all the effects and the sounds and the swirly atmospherics and all that kind of stuff, but you don't really often get a lot of tunes that you could, sing. Or if you picked up acoustic guitar, would they still sound as good? So we kind of look at the post shoegaze thing as being, you're taking the sounds and the approach of layering the music and the instruments and the effects and all that kind of stuff. And we've all got pedal boards that you need to get a bus from one end to the other to get through. And but at the end of the day, we're you could play our songs with just bass guitar drums and they would still be as good as songs. It's just the approach we've taken to the instrumentation is is probably a nod towards that kind of shoegaze thing. But certainly, I don't know about you, Dave, but certainly from my point of view, it was the songs were the make or break.
Yeah, same with me. It was unlike anything else that was around at the time. I'd been in bands for a while before, and I'd been doing my own stuff for a couple of years, and I've been looking to get back into a band. And I grew up around the corner from Nathan, so I always knew Nathan. And when I saw that he was looking for musicians again, you know, straight away, he sent me 4 songs to learn. I learned everything that they had available. I made sure I wanted this gig. I wanted to destroy all competition to get the role with this band. So I think for me it was mainly most of the other bands around were kind of doing the same kind of. It was the post-punk thing. Everybody was doing that fast, you know, kind of bar chords, shouty, not a lot of melody, a lot of energy, but not a lot going on. I just saw that as a bit of a phase thing. It's gonna date. Like in 5 years' time, people will look back on the whole post-punk thing and just go, yeah, they're all a bit same. You know, they're all cheap knockoffs of the previous one. Where I think Sun Mahshene, it's kind of this music could be from the 90s. It could be from any time. It's definitely got a bit of a timeless quality about it. That's what attracted me to the music anyway.
And I mean, and from your perspectives as musicians, how do you find the how do you find the kind of like your playing has changed in this band versus other projects? I mean, from your perspective, do you find that you're just doing the same thing you kind of would have been doing in other projects, or is it different in this project?
Well, I was a guitar player before, so I'm playing bass now. I used to play bass in a very the style would be very similar to say Manny from the Stone Roses, where now there's elements like Peter Hook, and you know I've got like synth added to the bass, you know, so it's completely changed my approach to playing. I don't know about you, Rob, but my playing is totally different since I've joined the band.
Your playing is just what really makes the band move. It's that rhythm section is really important because our drummer is has nearly like a jazz feel to it, how he plays. It's almost like he's playing really lightly, but at the same time it's thundering through the drums, and it really connects well with the way the bass goes. For me, it's like I kind of feel I play 2 instruments. I play a guitar and a pedal board because there's so much there's so much going on in terms of the approach. Like before that, it was probably what I would have played was probably a bit more straightforward, more just kind of a bit of reverb, bit of overdrive, and you're kind of sorted then. And you know, from the first iteration of the board I put together when I joined the band to now is nearly a completely different set of pedals, because as you develop, you kind of go, oh, you know what I really need? I really need that pedal.
I think I had 2 pedals when I joined.
Yeah.
I think a tuner and a distortion pedal. That was it.
Take a look around at everyone else, and you're like, hang on a second, I can't be pedaled here. So there's a lot of focus on. There's always because we have 3 guitars. There's always something going on in terms of, if we were all just chugging away on the chords, then it would just be, you know, there'd be no point doing that. So everyone is kind of doing something different. So we've always spent a lot of time working on the kind of the blend of the instruments, the blend of guitars, just to make sure that everything sounds right, you know, in terms of everyone is doing something that's unique and is bringing something different to create the overall picture. And then we added,
it's not just for the sake of it. It's you know, there's different tones in the 3 guitars. You know, there's a different feel. In some cases, you may be playing the same chords, but it does add something. It's not just for the sake of it.
And it's kind of like, before that, I was either the only guitarist in a band, or I was in a band with 2 guitarists. And now with the 3rd, you kind of go, when if we're working on new material, or if we're working on arrangement or something like that, you have the freedom to go, what can I do here? I'm going to play something that I probably would have been too restricted to play something, you know,
the ambient stuff.
Yeah, if you had to be the play rhythm, you know, this kind of thing. And there's parts where you don't play at all, like and like this whole part of tracks where you don't play, but the fundamental part is when you do come in, when you are coming in to play something, that it's what you're adding to it then. So it's nearly the notes you don't play, as they like that famous thing. It's nearly as
Yeah.
important as the notes you do play.
Do you find like your relationship with your gear has kind of changed too? Because you were mentioning adding effects pedals. Like I was wondering, like are you kind of averse to, for example, because it depends, from each musician. Some are very like, they just want, their amp and their pedals and their instrument. But others are kind of more willing to add, technology, computers into the mix too. I was wondering, do you find that would streamline things, or is it about the kind of the purity of just having the effects, and that's kind of what you have to work with, like, is with whatever effects pedals you happen to have.
I don't think there's a rule really in terms of how we do things in terms of technology. I mean, there's a lot of synth on the album. There's a lot of kind of our arpeggiated kind of synth parts, kind of this kind of stuff kind of going on in the background, because we have Asha on keyboards and she plays all these synth parts. And that adds a nice little layer in where you don't have to play a guitar part because you've got a synth part doing the thing. And I think we're already working on our next album in terms of writing it and demoing it. And there's a lot of work on, like, let's not have the guitar there, let's put the synth in there instead, or put a keyboard in there, or use a drum loop, or use one of the things that we try to see what we can do as well in other genres of music. What would happen here, that kind of thing. So is there an ambient patch we can use for this section, or is there can we put an acoustic, like there's a surprising amount of acoustic guitar in the album as well, just doing a strum here and there that you don't really notice. So we're kind of in the studio when we were recording the album, we'd be listening to it, and because there's like 25 of us all standing around and we can all play each other's instruments, we're kind of like, hey, do you know what would be good? Why don't we try this? And we would usually do that about 20 minutes before we were due to finish for the night. We would come up with this idea that we would just have to do, but it will be, the beauty of it is that it's an open book. We're not restricted to a genre. Like if you're a psych band, then you're restricted to a genre where you're playing that kind of music. If you're a shoegaze band or a post-punk band or whatever it is, you're restricted to the genre and the confines of the genre, where we feel as we move on, we're going to probably move more and more away from being definable. And that's really what we want, because, that's what a lot of great music from the 90s and the 70s and the 60s were, is that they weren't really definable, and they were a whole new thing, but they had not.
It keeps it interesting for us and the audience as well.
Yeah. You can see where it came from, and that's what we want. And that's what people come up to us after shows and they say, oh, wow, like, I can totally see I can hear your influences, but it's not a knockoff, like you were saying, Dave. It's not like a copy of somebody else. It's kind of like it's kind of something different, and it's kind of, you can see where it comes, you can see where it's come from, and you can see what it's turned into. And I think that's really the strength of the band, and is the fact that we've all been around for a while in terms of playing in the music scene, and we've had our own groups, and we've even released our own records and stuff like that. Is that it's nearly like a super group, but without all the members being world famous. So I think we've come to that. We've got that ability, that we've got enough people in the group who've got the experience of creating their own music, rather than it just being one person driving it or two people driving it, that we're all able to kind of add that in. So there's no restriction in terms of, and we all have kind of different tastes and different backgrounds and stuff like that. So it's quite freeing actually to have that and there's very few disagreements, which is really what it's, so far anyway.
I disagree.
I knew you would.
Yeah.
So from what you're saying there, I mean, it seems like the music is actually very collaborative. In terms of, it seems like everyone's kind of like pitching in ideas and kind of helping to craft the songs. I mean, I'm wondering from the songwriting perspective. I know I was reading an interview with Nathan, and he was kind of saying that he kind of comes in. If I'm correct in saying this, like he kind of comes in with the kind of the general, I guess, sort of base of what a song could be, and then everyone just kind of expands upon that. Would that be correct in terms
Yeah,
of how you guys make music?
for
Yeah,
the most part. I mean, probably in more recent years, probably he and I have done, like, I'd be shooting ideas over to him and he'd be shooting ideas over to me, and he'd take my verse and put a chorus on it, or I'd take his chorus and put a hook on it or something like that. So the album we're about to release was probably more collaborative from that point of view, from a songwriting point of view. And I think going forward, because we're kind of jamming stuff out, and because Dave, you write material, Asher writes material, so we're kind of, I think it makes sense to do that, because I mean, there's no, it's not a dictatorship. It's very democratic, and it's kind of, it's kind of funny, because I remember when I first came into the band and I was kind of plugging in and tuning up and getting ready to jam for the first time. We just kind of got on with it, and I was at the end of the session, I was like, I don't know if anything I was playing was right, or no one told me anything. So, but I think that was the strength. That was the strength of what the band was. It was like, right, you're in the band because you're good at that, so off you go, do it.
yeah, you're left to do
Rather
it. Nobody's micromanaging you.
yeah,
Kind of saying play it that way. Like it was the same with me on these songs. When I came into the band the first, I learned the existing songs exactly as they were. But then over time, there was a bit of freedom to kind of add a few little bits. And now at this stage, some of the older songs, I play them completely different
yeah.
to the original recording. So like it's great to have been able to be given the freedom to kind of put my own stamp on it. So it's a really good part of it for me, being able to do what I feel suits the song.
Mm.
Yeah, one thing I noticed when I was actually listening to your music was that even though you have all these different instruments kind of competing, I think everyone does get their fair share in the mix. Like I think it really is kind of a cacophony of everyone's instrumentation. Again, is that something that's important when writing the song, to make sure that everyone gets like their bit without being too hokey, or is again that just as a unit? Because to explain what I mean, sometimes I find like I listen to certain mixes of songs, and it seems like they're intentionally making sure that, okay, there's a bass fill here, and this part you get the drums. I don't get that feeling from your music. It doesn't feel calculated in that sense. But I was wondering, from your perspective, do you find that um everyone just gets that chance to shine, or is it kind of more of a deliberate decision?
No, I don't think it's deliberate to have everyone do their thing. I think everyone is doing the thing because there's a part for them to play, and if there isn't something for them to do, I always remember reading about Radiohead when they were recording Kid A, and they had to go into the studio with the understanding that there could be tracks that not all the members are going to be on,
Yeah.
because that's just the way it is. And it's kind of not that it's necessarily like that for us, but it's kind of the case that where when we're recording the album, when someone has an idea for a part, it was like, okay, do it. Like you play the part then. Or if somebody didn't have something to play, then they didn't play something, but they didn't really mind, because ultimately we were, all going to be creating the music, and there was going to be there was something to do anyway, because there's so many layers. Like there's per song, there's so many guitar tracks, and there's so many little things doing little moments that you kind of. We were actually only in the studio the other night doing a radio edit of one of the tracks, and it was the first time in a while that we'd actually got to see all the parts, and we heard a part, and we were like, "Oh, what was that? I don't remember that part." It was like a backwards guitar going over a guitar solo, and I've listened to this 100 times since we finished it, and I was like, I absolutely have no memory of number one, whoever did that. And Nathan said, "Oh, it was him that did it," but just you forget about all these things because there's so many little bits to it. So it's kind of like it's by necessity more than anything, rather than by design, that everyone has something to do, rather than saying, well, there hasn't been enough of whoever on this track, we better give them a guitar solo or something like that.
Yeah.
There's just not enough time to not to or to do it, to not have to worry about that kind of stuff.
That's fair. And the other thing I was wondering, just in terms of, because you were mentioning earlier that, like, you want your music to be able to translate. Like if you were to do like an acoustic session or something like that, you don't want your music to be too, I guess, confined. I was wondering, like, when you're actually recording the music, obviously you have so many different artists kind of collaborating, but is there is there a distinction to kind of go, okay, we're not going to put anything on a record that we can't replicate live, or are you guys kind of happy to sort of go, well, the live sound is one thing, the studio sound is another? What's your relationship with that, I guess?
Yeah, pretty much. We were only talking about this the other night, that I think it was Noel Gallagher said recently, if you can capture the essence of the record rather than try and replicate it note for note, that's really what it's all about. And I really do feel the best representation of the band is when you come and see us live, because again, we've had people come up to us. We usually end with a big kind of crescendo, as you want to do, and we've had people come up to us just kind of like, I was in a different zone for that
Yeah.
last 20 minutes, this kind of thing. And it can be the way people consume music now, there's a lot of distractions. You can just go next, this kind of thing, where if you're standing in a venue and you're watching the band, you kind of you either leave or you stick it out. So yeah, we feel the live thing is where it really kind of kicks in. But we do, like, everything we have on the album and everything we've had on the previous releases, we can play live, and we have played live. So it's not like we're making something that's impossible to play live. Some are easier to do than others, obviously. But yeah, I think it's I don't think, Dave, I don't think we've ever really made a distinction. Like, I don't think we've ever really had that difficulty in
No, I think most of the songs I find we've probably done a live version where I preferred the live version to the recorded version. I think we're definitely, like, we're much better to experience live than we are on record. I think anyway.
Mm.
I always find with certain songs, yeah, maybe there's, maybe you've got 5 guitars on the recorded version, and when you do it live, it doesn't quite have it, but it changes the way you do the song, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think,
sorry, my phone has just gone off there for
no worries.
Sorry.
I think I think for an audience, when I go see a band and they're just playing the perfect version of the album track, and it's kind of like, okay, I could have done that at home and saved myself 90 euros. I mean, it's it's like, I feel when you go to a gig, you should do something a little bit different. I don't mean you're going to start singing, because another thing you can't do, like, I hate that thing where the singer starts singing a completely different cadence.
Yes.
Everyone's like trying to sing along and they can't do it.
I know.
So not quite that far, but I think what you can do is you can give them a different feeling from, or you can create a different vibe. And for us, it's louder than it is anything else, and that kind of, the experience of that. And I don't mean volume for volume's sake. It's not like we're Spinal Tap, the world's loudest band, but it's just, it comes from, it's kind of that good. It hits you in the gut, and it gives you that kind of, it's like the My Bloody Valentine thing. It kind of just, it elevates the listening experience a bit when we do that. And you can do that on the record, but you'd have to turn it up. It's kind of, so I think when for us to play to audiences, we want to make sure that we're doing something that's really good. And what we want to do is be on the big stages and be on as big a stage as we can. And I think you really need to have a really good approach to live. And all the good bands, all the big bands that are still touring, they've always had a really good live show, and they don't just turn out the same set every night, and they don't just kind of stand there doing, there's something special. You kind of feel you've gone to a gig and you come out of that gig going, that was a really special gig, that kind of thing. So every time we play live, I always want to do that, even if there's only 20 people in the room, so just say, well, those 20 people, let's make them have a great night, that kind of thing. Let's make them walk out going, wow, and tell all their mates, bring them all next time.
Actually, is there much room in your set for kind of diversion or improvisation? Because I don't know, like, how kind of like restricted you are in terms of like tuning, or in terms of who's playing what in each song. Like, I don't know what the restrictions are in terms of like kind of like what the parameters, I guess, of like the allowable divergence, I
No,
guess.
there's no room for noodling.
Okay, yeah.
So no
But I mean,
noodling.
though, when we play our set finisher, when the bomb drops, but we've never played that the same twice.
Mm.
And the thing I love about playing that song is like our drummer Dave he'll play something completely different every single time, and it keeps us on our toes, and it's kind of exciting in a way, because it's not, you're not just going through the motions of, all right, we've got 16 bars of this. So if we're in the humor of it, we'll play the outro to that for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It'll just keep going until everybody's kind of like, giving the nod, saying, look, it's time to go.
Yeah. They're
Until
flashing
they
the
knock
light.
off your sound.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the way we rehearse is very, we get in the room, we're setting everything up. There's probably an initial 5-minute chat about the football, and then we're off for 3 hours. And there's really we stop, after we run through the set for another arbitrary 5-minute chat about the football, and then we're back into it again. So there's it's really, really disciplined, and it's really, really focused. So everything, there's not really, I wouldn't say, like beyond what Dave described, there's moments where you can kind of be a bit looser, but at the same time, what we're trying to do is make what is really tightly rehearsed sound natural and organic and flowing, so that it kind of, people could hear it and go, because it's, again, we're playing slightly different parts to what's on the record, and because out of necessity or design, that it could be improvised, but it's not. It's like really tightly rehearsed. But we want to ensure that it doesn't sound that you're not too, like this, trying to play that. It is actually quite loose, and
doesn't sound too tightly wound.
Yeah, it's not too tightly wound, and it's not too over. What do they say? You can
too
over
much glisten.
Yeah, you can sharpen the knife too much, like, so it's kind of just to hit that sweet spot where everything is just kind of flowing nicely, and that's really kind of how we do. That's our approach to that.
One other thing I was wondering, because you were kind of talking about kind of the dissolvement of genre, and your kind of place in trying to make, I guess, genreless music. I was wondering, do you find now your project can kind of exist? Because, like, in other times, like, I think people were a lot more genre inclined. People, um, wanted a certain thing, where I find now people are a lot more receptive to kind of giving everything a chance. And I think a lot of that is perhaps due to streaming culture, where, people have the history of recording music at their fingertips for essentially free. And so, it's very uncommon, I think, now for people to only listen to one specific thing. It's very different when you're asking people to buy LPs as the only means of accessing music. Like, then people are going to be more genre inclined. Do you find that Sun Mahshene could have existed at any other given time in history?
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because it's exactly how people listen to music. They listen to a bit of everything. If they're listening to playlists or New Music Friday or whatever it is, there's every bunch of everything in there. And people will quite happily listen to rock music next to R&B, next to pop, next to whatever it is. So that does kind of, I mean, like, if you look at shoegaze isn't really, shoegaze was never a genre anyway. I mean, shoegaze was a mildly mocking tone to describe bands who played that kind of music, because they were staring down at their effects pedals for the length of the show. So to have that as a genre is kind of, to have that as an up and coming and soon to be very prevalent genre is very funny and ironic. But to your point, yeah, I think you certainly wouldn't have had people. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I remember, like, if you watch an MTV or something like that, and you'd see a bit of everything, and you'd be kind of like, yeah, it was a pretty good song by whoever it was, And I certainly,
like, Jules Holland is similar. Like, Jules Holland is the prime example of that. Like, you got a rock band, and then a jazz troupe, followed by the throat singers of Mongolia. It's you'll get a mad kind of diversity of the playlist there. Like, And I think that's the way people listen to music now. For me, I'm still kind of a bit more old fashioned with my approach to it. Like, if I like a track, I'll go and listen to the whole album.
Yeah,
that'll generally be like the gateway for me, and I'll listen to the full album. I'd kind of listen to albums, I think, more than playlists. But yeah, I do see how you could, Sun Mahshene could release a kind of a shoegazy type song, and then we could do something that's a little bit more synthy, maybe even closer to dance kind of stuff. And you could have fans of both. I don't think you're restricted by the genre as much as you were in the past.
Actually, one thing I want to ask there, because I know you guys are very much proponents of the album, and obviously, as you mentioned, you're working on one now. Um, when people listen to an album as a body of work, as one kind of collective piece, they kind of expect, I think, a certain continuity between songs. I was wondering, do you find that restrictive then, in terms of like trying to make sure that each song is kind of coherently sound, I guess?
Like, do you mean by itself or in comparison
So
to?
when you're making an album, I think there is an expectation versus, say, like releasing singles as individual tracks, where things don't have to connect necessarily. There doesn't have to be connecting tissue between
Yeah.
songs. But obviously, I mean, when you're listening to an album, I think sometimes, because I've definitely listened to certain artists where, if like a studio album can kind of feel like just a random compilation of songs,
Mm.
and there's no consistency, there's no through line. Sometimes there's not even a consideration for kind of how each song complements each other. It can just feel like listen to a playlist. But I mean, obviously, I get the impression that you guys are very, very considerate for those things. But do you find like trying to compile everything into a kind of coherent piece can be restrictive, or?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky that we only have 8 songs on the album, so it wasn't as difficult as
Yeah.
kind of a playlist for like 14 songs. But no, you're right, because I always remember a lot of albums would always be front loaded, so they'd have the first, second, and third singles as tracks 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
and then whatever's on the rest. And it was a bit like those 60s albums where you'd have side one would be the side two would be the filler, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we're all like, for me, the running order of an album is a hugely important thing, and you try to make it interesting, because I think if you can take people on a bit of a journey from the start to the finish, even having a break halfway through for flipping the record over, you have to put that into consideration as well. So what one do you finish side one with, and what one do you start side two with? And
we did go through a few different variations of the track list before we settled on what was right. So I think it's something we definitely did put some thought into, in terms of the running order of the tracks, to try and get it to flow nicely and to get a good feel to it.
And we even have a little feature, a little surprise that's only on vinyl.
Okay, a hidden track?
Not really, kind of, but you'll have to buy it to find out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
We
not.
won't tell you where it is either.
It only really worked on record. It didn't really make sense to do it in a situation where there would be people putting individual tracks on things. So it's just a nice little nod to that kind of thing, where people would have that kind of flow, of a whole suite of tracks. And so I think it's important to have both understanding of both, that each individual song is strong by itself. Like, you could pull each of those songs and they could be singles, but also to look at it and go, well, what does it mean to have? Where should that song be? Are you kind of mirror side one, side two, or mirror the balance between the first half and the second half of the album? And certainly, I know that if you look at the late '90s, early 2000s, at the peak of the CD era, albums were way too long, and they were like 70 minutes long, and it was cram as many tracks as possible onto it, and they were just exhausting. You'd never get through it. They were exhausting to listen to. And I think now, you look at albums that are being released now, they're in and around the 40-45 minute kind of mark, because everybody wants to put their record out. Everyone wants to put it out on vinyl. And if you go over 42 minutes or whatever it is, then you're into double vinyl territory, and that's going to be really expensive to produce. and really expensive for people to buy. So I think, you know, that kind of classic album length is kind of come back a bit now, which is good.
Yeah, I think when CD came out, I remember I interviewed the Melvins one time, and they were kind of talking about like once CD came around, there was a lot of aversion to it from musicians, but you know, they were huge proponents of it because they were like, well, it's so unlimited, you know, like it's at the time the technology seemed so unlimited that it was just kind of like, yeah, let's throw as much stuff on here as we can. I think also during the CD era, like as you were kind of mentioning earlier, like about kind of like front loading a lot of the hit singles at the front, and even like, you know, even albums that are, I think, good, like Nevermind are guilty of that. Like even good albums are guilty of that, of just like front loading. Because if you think of like, you know, that track order, it's like, you know, it's like Smells Like Teen Spirit, you know, In Bloom, Lithium. It's like all the hits are at the front too.
Yeah.
But I think there was like a huge issue where people at the time would buy full length albums just to get the single. So a lot of times you'd have like, you know, like two or three hit songs and then just like, you know, just complete filler. And I think that was a huge issue
Yeah.
in the mid to late 90s, you know, even the early 2000s.
I think a good thing about Nevermind though is I've just noticed your Air t-shirt, by the way.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Were you at the concert recently?
I was, yeah, this
Yeah,
where I
yeah.
got it, yeah. And they were so good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think with Nevermind, I think Nevermind came out first, and then they pulled the singles from it after because they were just so good. The songs were
Yeah, yeah.
just so good
Oh,
rather
okay, I didn't know that, yeah.
than but yeah, I used to always have a rule, which was not rule, but it was always like it was a four song. If you heard four songs from the CD, then you know you're pretty sure you're probably going to like the rest of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you crossed over that, then you'd be all right. So you only have to like half of our album before you know you're gonna want to buy it.
I guess like just before I move on to the music, and you know, try not to take up too much more of your time, but one thing I want to talk about before we actually talk about the music, I want to talk about the logistics actually of you guys as a band, because if I'm correct, your band members are kind of scattered across Ireland, the UK, and Poland. I was wondering logistically, how does that kind of like work? And again, is there any we were talking about kind of the advantages of technology in terms of creating streaming culture, which allows for, I think, a more diverse palette amongst the average listener. But one other thing I think of you know, the benefits of technology is that I'm talking to a lot of artists now who do have kind of dispersed members,
Mm.
and their projects are able to continue. Like even somewhere like in the United States, for example, like you might have one member in like Chicago and then one in LA. They're in the same country, but like that's so massive that they might as well be between Ireland and Poland, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, I was wondering logistically, how does that work,
Well,
and
it's
how
not
does
quite. We're not quite the
technology
Rolling Stones, where we're all living in different mansions in France.
work?
We all live in. We are all in Ireland. Like we're all pretty. Like five out of the six of us are in Dublin, and one is in. And actually, we're all on the north side, and one of us is in Dundalk. So yeah, we're not. It's not too. It's
Okay.
not like we have to work remotely. But it is a good point because it does make collaboration on things a lot easier when you have technology to be able to share stuff over Dropbox, whatever it is. You know, just to if you're working on, or we use Drive to do that. So logistically, it is like the more people you have in a band, then naturally the more challenging it is to get everyone in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
But we're
Especially
all
because like everyone works, everyone lives, you know?
yeah, but we're all committed to it, and everyone is, you know, everyone is on the same page pretty much in terms of what we want to achieve, and we know what needs to be done to achieve that.
I guess just talking about your music then, as you're mentioning, you have an album coming up. I just wanted to actually clarify something here. So, yeah, you had the Space Echoes album come out, which was a compilation of previous EPs. Uh, since then, you've had three singles: Reverie, New Shores, and your recent single, Pale Ashore. I was wondering, are these singles that have been released going to be on the record, or are these like individual singles that are kind of divorced from what's on the album?
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. They're on the right. Yeah, they're on the album. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, go. And are they all produced by Mark Gardner, or was it just this previous song? Or sorry,
He,
engineered by?
it was the mastering. Yeah, so yeah, they're mastered
Okay,
by.
sorry, I have all my information wrong.
No, you're grand. No, so we recorded it with in Track Mix Studios with Michael, and he produced it, and mixed it. We kind of mixed with him. And then Mark Gardner did the mastering. Yeah, so I'd been in touch with him on about a previous project. He has his mastering studio in Oxford, and what was most surprising was that I had sent him an email, and then I got an email back from Mark Gardner. Yeah, there's an email from Mark Gardner in my inbox. Okay, so that was kind of cool, and he was a great guy to
He's
work.
got it printed up on his wall.
I have it saved, and so yeah. He's a great guy to work with because he's very enthusiastic about what he does, and he's old school in his approach, analog, warmth, and kind of like organizing time for him to do stuff was kind of funny because he's like, oh yeah, I can, I'll be away in August because I'm on tour with Ride, but I'll come back and I'll work on your stuff then. This kind of thing. It's like, well, if you have to, Mark, but if you have to do that, fine. We'll wait.
Just go and play in Tokyo. You forget about us. Like,
yeah. Make sure you come back and do it. We're waiting here. But no, he's great, and obviously we're all big Ride fans, so it was really a dream come true to have him working on the project. Yeah.
What do you think is his mastering kind of added to the songs that compared to previous tracks, because as you were kind of mentioning, I mean, each song that you guys have released has such different kind of unique character that and I mean this as a compliment. It's hard to like you said categorize, but it's hard to kind of get a consistent through line. Complimentary, I say that. Yeah, so I was wondering, from your perspective, how do you think the sound of this? But what I'm trying to say, what I'm badly expressing, is that each song feels so kind of individualized and feels so different that it's hard to kind of say like, here's how this album differs from this album, if you know what I mean. I was wondering, how do you find that Mark's kind of mastering has kind of altered your sound?
I think Michael in track mix kind of he got the songs, he got the idea of what we were doing very quickly, and I think his mixes were fantastic. So I think what he handed over to Mark will do. The bones of it was already there. Mark just kind of put the cherry on top, really. I think Michael was fantastic with what he did, and just how relaxed he is to work with as well.
Perfect. I guess the final thing I'll just ask is do you guys find, because I think as we mentioned, the mixing, the mastering, the production of your music is paramount. I mean, it's important obviously to everyone's music, but I think obviously with so many plates spinning here, I mean, having the right production is really essential to making sure it gets out as it should. I was wondering, do you find that working with external producers, I know obviously you guys aided in the production of this, co-produced, but I was wondering, do you find that working with external producers is something that you're always going to do? Do you find that adds some dynamic to the music that perhaps if you guys were just self-producing solo, you wouldn't have, or how do you feel about kind of the collaborative process in terms of the production?
I think it's very important, and it was very important for us. There was a couple of things that were really important about it. The first was that it was somebody who wasn't it was not that there's any ego in the band, but that there's somebody who has nothing really they don't have what am I trying to say? They don't have a hand in the game in terms of, they're not trying to push anything, or they just care about what sounds the best. So if someone's idea sounded better, they're in a good position to say, no, we should use that one, or try that sound, or use that guitar, or use that whatever. And that was really, I think it's really important to have that, because we're not there yet in terms of people just doing things because they want to do it, and hopefully we'll never be like that. But it is important to have just that third party who's able to look at it a bit more objectively. The second thing is, as well, is that what he was great about was that he would hear something, and then he knew, like Dave said, he knew exactly what we were trying to do, and he would say, just give me a sec, and he would do some thing with the amp or whatever it was, or he would start pulling wires out like a telephone exchange. He'd be doing one thing or the other, and then whatever he did would sound so much better. And then it's great to have somebody like that, because you can get a lot of situations where you go in to record, the producer sets up and goes, right, lads, off you go.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, you're kind of rushed in certain ways. Like,
Yeah.
you know, just get your recording done, and that's it. They'll just point the microphone at it and they'll record it for you. Where Michael was kind of, you know, he was offering suggestions. You know, if you do it slightly different, it'll sound this way. And you know, we took a lot of his input on board.
And the great thing about him is that his a lot of what he works on is heavy metal. He works with heavy metal bands, so he has a really obviously strong knowledge of how to record and layer and balance guitars. So we're coming into him with our 25 guitar parts per track. Like, he knows exactly what to do with that. In other words, anyone else could be like, whoa, guys, like, we got to strip it back, you know, this kind of thing. Yeah. Where he's like, well, if you want to add another one on, let's do that. Let's see where it goes. You know?
Only 25.
Yeah. That's a very conservative estimate. So you know, I think again, to have somebody like that who's not. And he's not a producer that's trying to be, quote unquote, the producer in terms of like, well, I've got my sound, you know, like a lot of these big name producers would be, which would also be an interesting approach and an interesting way of working with somebody maybe in the future. But certainly his approach was, okay, well, I'm going to record you the way you want to be recorded, but at the same time, you know, he's giving us the freedom to explore the sound that we wanted to have. But like Dave said, he'll just say whatever. This sounds better than this, you know, and it generally ends up being like that. And he's got great technology, and he's got a great mind in terms of understanding how things work. And we were able to spend a lot of time looking up, you know, different synth sounds and reverbs and all the kind of the nerdy stuff. So yeah, I think working with like, we can all produce, and we've all produced our own music, and it sounds very much like you know, and if I record something and it sounds very much like I made it or Nathan made it, you know, that, or whoever it is. But then when you have somebody else doing it, then obviously it becomes the personality of the band more so than just that one person who's producing it.
Perfect. I think I've asked everything I've asked, and you've been very gracious for your time. I guess one final thing I'll ask is, generally, you know, when you're looking in terms of like a release for the album, do you have that sorted yet? And is there anything you guys would like to add or plug or anything?
The release date is the 23rd of August.
Okay. So it's coming up soon, yeah.
Pretty soon, yeah. And we're just working on the launch strategy, which is you know, again, a necessary evil. We have the single is out, and we've got something coming out next week, which is related to the single, which is, if you watch, keep an eye on our socials, you'll be able to see what that is.
This is probably out by then.
Yeah, and then what we're going to do, hopefully for the rest of the year, is we're going to do gigs, we're going to play. We've got some representation in Holland, so we're going to get over there, because we were over there earlier in the year, play some gigs around there, Germany and Belgium, you know, that kind of region. It's great appetite for this kind of music in those countries, and great audiences there too. And hopefully by next summer we're hitting all the festivals and doing all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're looking forward to. So yeah, hopefully it'll all happen, and you know, we're ready to do it.
Perfect. Thanks very much for your time, guys. I've really appreciate talking with you, and you know, best of luck with the album. I don't think you need it, but best of luck, and you know, enjoy everything that's coming up. Yeah,
nice one.
Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks a million. That was great.
Best of luck, lads. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks a million.
Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.